The Toronto Maple Leafs played their first game after pulling off a big trade. David Morassutti of Locked On Leafs is here to talk about that and what else the Leafs may do before the trade deadline. All that and more coming up on this episode of the Locked On NHL Podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome, everybody, to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Well, the Leafs, coming off the big trade over the weekend, had their first game and ended up with a 4-1 win. David Morassutti of Locked On Leafs joins us and talk to me a little bit about their two new additions and how they did in this big win for Toronto on Saturday.
Yeah, there was definitely a buzz not just in the arena, but just with the team itself, how they came out right away. Like, we thought Ryan O'Reilly was going to score within the first minute of his first game with the Leafs. It's weird because these guys didn't have any practice. They pretty much had a quick skate around for the warm up. They didn't really know who they were going to be playing with until the lineup came out. So it was definitely a very interesting scenario. But they both of them brought their own flavor to the last night. I mean, Ryan O'Reilly got an assist, so he got his first point out of the way. Noel Acciari looked even, a lot of people liked his game a lot more just because he was physical. The fourth line looked like it finally had a bit of an identity. That's kind of been a big part of what has been missing with the bottom six, is kind of that lack of identity. So you bring in a Noel Acciari and you know exactly what you're going to get from him, and he came as advertised. They both did. I didn't expect Acciari to have as much of an impact. Sure, he didn't, score anything, but that's not what they brought him in for. And there was a lot of good things to see from their debuts.
Were you surprised with where they put O'Reilly in particular in the lineup, and then moving John Tavares to wing for part of the time?
Yeah, we were wondering where exactly he would have gone. It made sense to have Ryan O'Reilly stay at center. That's the position he's played. That's what he's most comfortable with. And to have him go on to the third line, it made a lot more sense just to move John Tavares to the wing, whether it's just for this game. I'm not sure. They are playing Sunday night, so I'm not sure how that will change in terms of the lineups. I'm assuming that for now they're going to keep it the same until they get, because of the back-to-back situation, just to give them some time to get used to it, because then they'll have the Monday off, and then I assume Tuesday in Buffalo, when they do play again, maybe eventually we'll start to see how exactly Sheldon Keefe wants the lineup to look. But I think for now, just keep things as it is because it's working. They're winning.
Yeah, and winning is indeed important. So you got your first view of the two new players and starting to get a feel as to where they're going to fit into the lineup. We still have a little less than 2 weeks until the trade deadline. What, if anything else, do you see the Maple Leafs looking to do?
I still think they need an addition on the blue line. When I look at their defense, it gets me a little concerned when the playoffs come around and when the intensity goes up. Can this defense handle it? I do think they need depth there. They at times, they've been without TJ Brody, they've been without Morgan Riley, they've been without even Timothy Liljegren for stretches of the season. The team has been able to step up, but I get concerned that when they have to play against a very good opponent, whether it be Tampa, and if they move on, Boston or whoever, it's only going to get harder. And I don't know if this defense, the way it's constructed right now, is ready for that. Now the problem is there's not many defensemen out there, so they might have to kind of look a little bit outside of the box because they're not going to be able to afford, after making the trade for a while, they're not going to be able to afford, a Jacob Chikrin, a Gavrikov even. So they're going to have to get a little creative if they want to add to the back end.
What kind of defenseman do you think they should be looking to add?
A lot of people like Luke Shen. That's kind of the style. I don't know if Luke Shen has the foot speed that some teams crave, but I think he brings just what this Leafs team kind of needs is a little more of that rugged, stay-at-home type, make smart decisions in your own end. Don't stay in your own end a lot. I think that's where the Leafs get in trouble. Turning the puck over, putting themselves in bad positions, and just not being able to get out of your zone. If they can get a defenseman that's capable of doing either or, whether it's help get that puck out of the zone, or if you're stuck in your own zone, you're going to be able to at least make it tougher on your opponents to score on you. So Luke Shen is kind of the ideal target because he's actually played well considering where Vancouver has been this season, and he's one of those guys that everybody is keeping their eye on.
All right, we'll keep an eye on that and see what the Leafs end up doing. We now, are coming into the last 25 games or so of the season, and the Leafs are 3 points ahead of Tampa Bay in the race for second place in the Atlantic Division. Probably about 95% sure that's the opening round of the playoffs matchup. How important is it for Toronto to finish ahead of Tampa Bay in the standings and get home ice advantage in that first round?
Oh, it's crucial. I still think that if that last season there was value in having that home ice advantage because the Leafs had a chance to end that series in 6. They had the chance to finish it in Tampa. Tampa obviously pulls it out in Game 6 and they win in Game 7. You want to give every advantage to a team that's that close to you in the standings and that close to like that series. The difference was 1 goal. Difference was 1 goal and the goal differential between the two. So every advantage you're going to be able to get is important. Last change dictating matchups. 4 out of the 7 games. Well, if it goes to 7 games, so I think the Leafs should definitely try their best to get home ice. It's going to be a dogfight. That's probably the only benefit right now from this final stretch is they do have something to play for. It's just now Tampa's got a little bit of breathing. Like they have a game in hand right now, and they got some easier matchups. The Leafs are, the Tampa's playing a little bit of catch up because of the game in hands the Leafs had prior to the All-Star break.
And how do you feel about the playoff format where you have Tampa Bay and Toronto? In my mind, 2 of the top 5 or 6 teams in the league, and they're going to have to face each other again, most likely in the first round.
I understand why the NHL was trying to create these rivalries, but the rivalry between Tampa and the Leafs, like no one's really talking about the rivalry. The only thing they're talking about is, here we go again, same 2 teams playing against each other. Under the current format, the Leafs and Tampa play in the first round. If they went to the traditional 1 versus 8 format, the Leafs would play the Rangers in the first round, and Tampa would actually be the 6th seed, while the Leafs would be the 4th seed in the Eastern Conference. That's where I don't like it, is that a matchup like the Leafs and Tampa, that doesn't scream to me round 1 type of matchup. That's more of a semifinal, conference final sort of matchup to me. Even like the Bruins and Leafs, I would rather see that as an Eastern Conference final than to see it in the second round. I just don't like how some of the better matchups of the playoffs have always come in the first couple of rounds and then the conference finals, it's like whoever's left after the 2 divisions just have at each other, especially in the Atlantic Division. Like the best teams for most of the season have been from the Atlantic with Boston, Toronto, and Tampa. The Metropolitan Division is catching up a little bit, but I still think that the 1 versus 8 format is a little bit more fair in terms of how the matchups come out in round 1.
I have to agree with you on that. David, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at @D_Morassutti. And yeah, follow all of our content at Locked On Leafs wherever you get your podcast from. YouTube, iTunes, and you can also follow our Twitter account, Locked On Leafs, on Twitter.
All right, David, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us.
Always appreciate it, Gil.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The midway point of the NBA season is here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use, and then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scorers and threes drained. And you can even use your knowledge of the NHL to help you win at FanDuel. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at an even bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA.